What's going on, everybody? This is your host, C-WEYZEY, coming back at you today with another video. Today, I got a really special one for you. I had the privilege and opportunity to sit down and chat on the phone with Matt Brown. For those of you that do not know, Matt Brown is a sports journalist. He publishes a newsletter, Extra Points, and he has been leaking a bunch of stuff, anything and everything on EA Sports College Football. And without further ado, I'm not going to keep y'all waiting. Here is the interview.
Hey, Matt, this is Cam. How are you doing today?
Cam, I'm doing all right. How are you holding up?
Oh, I can't complain. You know, I'm here.
Sounds good. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yes, I can. How about you? Can you hear me okay?
Nope. Yeah. Audio quality is just fine.
All right. Well, that's good. Well, I guess just want to say thank you for talking to me today. I really do appreciate it.
Sure. What can I help with?
Yes, I guess we can start out. For those that don't know who you are, could you tell everyone about yourself and exactly how you're getting information on EA Sports College Football?
Sure. My name is Matt Brown. I run the Extra Points newsletter, which you can find at extrapointsmb.com. That newsletter covers off-the-field stories that shape college athletics. I've been a working sports reporter for over a decade, and the bulk of the work that I do is writing about the business of college athletics, which means I spend a lot of time writing about things like NIL, about sponsorships, intellectual property, licensing, and how athletic departments make money. You know, I'm not a video game reporter so much as I am a college sports industry reporter, but over the course of, writing about those kinds of issues for years, I've built a lot of reporting relationships with many of the entities and companies that would be involved in making a college sports video game. And that's not just folks at EA, who I've gotten to know some developers and people on their corporate side, but also folks at CLC, folks at larger talent agencies and licensing companies, agents, and then people on the university side, folks that work in external affairs or athletic directors or licensing directors who get the kind of digital information to companies like EA. So through open records requests, through a lot of my own reporting, I've been able to learn a lot about what's happening with this game over the last 2 years, along with a lot of other things in the college sports industry.
Well, that's certainly a lot of information, and it's good to know, especially for people that have been wondering how you're getting information on this game.
Yeah. I mean, I've been doing this stuff for a long time, so some of this you can get through open records requests, which is different from other video game projects. You can't file a FOIA for the Dallas Cowboys. That's a private organization, but you can for the University of Texas.
Right.
So that's how you get it. And then when you do that enough, somebody at EA just gives you a call and says, let's talk about some of the things that you're getting, that you're reporting. That leads to something. I mean, that's how reporting works. So it's, what has frustrated, I think, some people in the YouTube or Reddit or internet community is maybe why I'm a little bit more conservative in what I'm writing, or they'll ask me a bunch of questions where I don't have receipts. And I'll just tell you, I can only tell you and report what I can prove. And everything that I've written on my newsletter, everything that I've shared on social media, the things we'll talk about here, it's all stuff that I have receipts for, or that I have from first-person interviews from people that have direct knowledge of what's going on. This is not somebody's uncle works at Nintendo kind of thing.
I understand, and reading your newsletter, I can definitely see that for everything that you do know, you've went into detail as much as you possibly could.
Yeah, that's the hope.
Okay. The next question I have, I personally get a lot, and a lot of my friends have asked me, with this game already being delayed once, and it is currently on schedule to release this upcoming summer, do you see another delay happening?
I don't think it's likely. Anything is possible, right? But
right.
I think it is very unlikely that it's delayed. There's a couple of reasons for that. One is EA is a publicly traded company. They've already talked about this game on shareholder meetings. This is one that investors are expecting to come out in between Q2 and Q3 of next year, and that's built into their earnings projections. And so another delay would cause financial pain to the company in a way that's that might be different for other kinds of releases. They also understand acutely the pressure that the company is under here, and for the pressure that they're going to get from fans of this IP, from the players and from the schools themselves. I mean, if we have COVID Part 2 and parts of the world go under lockdown or something, sure. I mean, things are possible, but it would be very surprising given how much is riding on them hitting this deadline and what people at EA are saying both in public and in private about the development timeline.
Well, that's completely understandable. I mean, anybody in their right mind clearly would agree with what you're saying. And I don't personally see a delay either, but that's just a question that gets brought up to me a lot.
Sure. No, I get it too.
Okay. Next one. We know this game is coming to PS5, Xbox Series S and X, the next generation consoles, but do you have any update on if it's coming to PC or not?
I don't. I'd be a little bit surprised if it's coming to PC, but I don't know for certain. The only thing I know is that it's not planning on being developed for the Switch. It's not planning on being developed for the previous generation of consoles. So my advice for everybody is if you really want this game, you should buy a PlayStation 5 or the most current Xbox. But I can't tell you for certain it's not coming to the PC.
Okay, yeah, and that's fair. It is safe to speculate because EA has released a lot of their games recently on PC. It's safe to assume that, why wouldn't they?
Yeah, that hasn't come up in any of the paperwork I've inspected. I haven't seen it yet.
Right. But at the same time, I guess it wouldn't surprise me if it did not come to PC because, PC is the modding platform.
It is. I don't know if that's so much the major issue here, right? Like they sell games that way before. One of the just big picture things I think some fans don't fully appreciate about this game is that as much as people like you and I are diehard college sports fans, this is a niche property to EA, right? This does not have the worldwide demand of FIFA or even Madden. And, moving things from different platforms onto PC where it can be modded or where it requires different level of updates requires different costs. And for a game that's not projected to sell anywhere close to what their major two flagship sports titles are, maybe that's something they decide they don't want to do in the first cycle here. I can't tell you one way or the other because that hasn't come up in any conversations I've had or any documents I've inspected. But often when you hear fans or things that people on the internet saying, like, well, why aren't they going to do X, Y, or Z? It's a major reason of it is because video games are way more expensive to make than they were in 2014. And even though there's so much pent-up fan demand for this product, it's simply not FIFA. And EA, the way this company is kind of evolved, has to think about scale a little bit differently than maybe a smaller developer might.
Oh, no doubt. And since we're on the subject of, earnings and sales, do you think this game might exceed their expectations because there has been such a drought and a delay for having one of these games?
I mean, yes, I think it's possible, but it kind of depends on what the expectations are, right? Like, what I have heard, not from EA specifically, but from industry analysts in the college sports and the video game world that I really trust, people who make a living projecting this kind of thing, have said that they, a successful launch, a successful title will sell somewhere between 20 and 25% of Madden. And Madden, is going to sell a gajillion copies. And that would be a success. So is it possible that they could, exceed expectations and hit like 30 or 34 or 35? Yeah, I think it's possible. Are they going to hit 50? No. Like that I don't think is very likely, just given the popularity of college football compared to the NFL, which has a global popularity that college sports does not. But this isn't gonna. This is still supposed to be a game that makes a lot of money.
Right. Well, another question I had is, will this game be a one-and-done release, or will it follow suit to other sports titles that EA releases on a yearly basis?
Yeah, my understanding and the message that they've communicated to the schools is that this is supposed to be an annual release. Now, Are you going to completely rebuild this game every single year? No. I mean, but you guys play sports video games. I play sports video games. You know how this works, right? Madden or NBA 2K or the NHL or FIFA will have changes from year to year besides just updating rosters. But they're not going to necessarily rebuild the engine from the studs or completely redo the physics every single time. But you do that. You completely rebuild the thing from the ground up, every 4 or 5 years. Maybe when you're moving to a new console generation, or when new engines or new hardware comes out and you have to make other changes. So that's part of what makes this particular release so significant, because they've had to redo literally everything. But yeah, they are treating this, and they're telling schools that they want to release a new one about every July, just like they did before.
Okay. Now, I also know they want this to be its own thing, considering it's technically a new working title.
That's right.
Could we possibly see that release maybe in late June?
I guess the internal conversations I've had have been they're looking at July. Is it possible it ends up June 20th? I mean, they haven't released a specific date. So I guess that's possible, but I would imagine July is probably what we're looking at here.
Okay. Well, in another interview that I've heard you do with another YouTuber, I think his name is Tubby Light. I think his name was Steven. I heard some interesting topic about the 3 service academies. And as far as their player likeness goes, do you have any update on that situation?
Yeah. So for folks that aren't aware, in order to have your name and your physical likeness depicted in a video game, if you're a college football player, you need to be paid for your name, image, and likeness, which is what EA is trying to do. With 11,000 other college athletes, it's what they were prohibited from doing over the last decade, which is why we haven't had any other games. For the vast majority of college athletes, it's not going to be a big deal. They want to be in the game. EA wants to pay them. Here's the group license. You sign the deal. No problem. But for our friends at Army, Navy, and Air Force, they are federal employees. They are members of the military, and they have military restrictions on outside income. If you're a quarterback for the Naval Academy, you can't do an NIL deal with the local pizza place like you can if you're at Maryland or at Florida or at Towson, at FCS school for that matter. So when I've talked to, the ADs and licensing directors and even one attorney at those 3 schools, all 3 said, hey, based on our current understanding of military guidance, they can't enter into an NIL deal. All 3 schools are trying to find an alternative solution to allow them to be in the game. The schools are going to be in the game. And that alternative solution, brother, that goes up to the Pentagon. That's not a question for 1 or 2 schools. That's a question for JAG lawyers and the federal government. We don't have a final answer for that now. Some of that might depend on what the final contract looks like, and we're not likely to see EA send out a final contract until April. But that's, people should not be shocked if they pick up a game and the troops are all going to have randomized players because we're not allowed to pay them.
And I mean, that's understandable. And that's understandable because that's quite up the food chain.
Yeah.
So to say.
And there are I would assume some national readiness reasons, maybe why you wouldn't want to make an exception, because you wouldn't want to compromise the military by allowing everybody to enter into something like this. Maybe you could let them be in the game and then pay them a stipend after they leave the service. I have no idea. And that's something that even the coaches don't really know right now, but that's what's being worked on.
Okay. Well, yeah, that is a very interesting topic, and I did want to see if you had an update on it, and I do appreciate that for you. But some of these next questions, I mean, I completely understand if you don't know, but, you've said before that anything as far as realism and what schools are sending, you know a lot about, but a lot of specific details you're still kind of vague about. So if you have the answer, that's great. If you can't answer, just say you can't answer. But
okay.
Do you know if there is going to be a dynamic attendance, weather delay, or disciplinary system in the game?
I don't know for certain about those three. I think of those three, if you're asking me to speculate, dynamic attendance seems like the easiest thing to be able to add in. Historically, there have been challenges with disciplinary systems while they still had the NCAA license, but this year they do not. But the specifics about what those three features may or may not look like are not finalized. I don't, for that particular thing, I would not expect them to be finalized until the spring of next year.
Okay. All right. And could we see a marching band halftime show?
Yeah, I think you could. The EA has asked schools for marching band music. They've asked schools for some assets relating to marching bands. Exactly what the presentation of halftime is going to look like hasn't been decided, but if that was a thing EA wanted, they would have the information that they need to do it.
Okay.
They haven't confirmed to me about a lot about what gameplay presentation is going to look like, but as part of their request for audio assets, they've asked for an awful lot of marching band stuff.
Okay. Okay, well, these next two questions are going to be a sore subject to a few people I know because it's got a specific name in the question, and you'll see what I'm talking about in a minute. But will there be any superstar abilities in the game like we have seen the last few years in Madden?
Oh, boy. To be honest, I don't know, and nothing like that's come anywhere close to coming up. Here's what I can tell you just like broadly, because I actually did talk to a couple of people at EA like 2 weeks ago. I asked a couple of like gameplay specific questions, and what those guys told me was, look, a lot of the gameplay core features and what some of the customization will look like, which you might talk about a little bit later, or these very specific things, the answer is going to be, we don't know, not because we're trying to be like cagey about it, but because we literally don't know. The game isn't finished, and realistically won't be mostly done. You won't have an alpha build done until the spring. So while there are some systems that are more we don't really want to talk about kind of what we're thinking about, because we know how sensitive fan expectations are. We want to tell you X is possible, and then we end up taking it out in February. But I haven't heard anything about superstar abilities, nor have I heard anything about trying to replicate any of the Madden specific stuff that's been in that series over the last several years. That hasn't been in my conversations.
Okay, well, the next question was also about the home field advantage system that they got in Madden, because in college football specifically, home field advantage is a big part of the sport.
It is. And what I can say specifically about that is that EA has spent an enormous amount of time and, quite frankly, money in trying to depict the specific game day traditions and atmosphere and pageantry as realistically as possible. And, I think it's safe to infer, given how much home field advantage was important in the previous versions of the game and how much energy they're trying to spend to make sure that Tennessee feels different from Florida, that feels different from Georgia State. I think that's a safe assumption. But I would not look at anything that has specifically appeared in Madden on any level over the past 5 or 6 years and assume that is going to be a part of college football or not be a part of college football. Like what I imagine may be a theme of this conversation. They're different entities. Like I'm telling you, man, They're not. Like I understand why fans, so many people on Twitter and Reddit and YouTube just say like it's just a reskin Madden, bro. It's just gonna be the same game. I'm telling you guys, like with all the credibility that I've earned as a reporter on this beat, which I hope I've earned some, that's not what this game is.
Well, I'm sure a lot of people will be glad to hear that, because I've heard a lot of people say, you know, it's going to be a reskin of Madden, but to that assumption, why ain't it released if it's just a reskin?
Yeah, it would have been out 2 years ago.
Right.
Yeah, and I don't mind saying this, right? Like, people at EA have Twitter accounts, man. Like, they're on Reddit. They know how people feel about Madden, and it's not like it's the fault of an individual developer why the game is what it is. There's some corporate pressures for that. It's a different kind of game. You know, it's a whole different conversation. The people that I know that are project leads on the college football side are die-hard college football fans. They're not die-hard NFL fans. These are people with 247 message board subscriptions and live and breathe the minutia of this stuff. And now I say this with the caveat here. I can't promise you that the game's going to be good. I wish I could. I haven't played it yet. There's a pretty decent chance I'm going to play it before you guys, but maybe not that much earlier. And it's entirely possible the game won't be any good. But all I can do is I can promise you the game's not going to be the same game as Madden. If it's bad, it's not going to be bad for the same reasons that Madden is bad. It's a different development team who have different objectives, who are trying to build a different product.
Right. And that's all we can ask for is it's something new, unique, and different and set apart from what's already there.
Yes, that I think is a safe assumption and expectation for this product. I really do believe that.
Okay. Now, going to get into a couple more questions, and specifically a couple of these get into what you've recently posted in your newest newsletter that I read, by the way. Great stuff. Y'all go check it out. Will this game be available for college football fans outside of North America?
It's a great question. And it's funny because I started getting this from a couple of readers over the last 6 months. I never thought about it before because it didn't occur to me that would have been an issue. So I reached out directly to folks at EA. If you subscribe to the newsletter, you would have found this out already, but it's not been out a couple of days. Yes, EA is planning on making this game available no matter where you live. If you are in Europe, if you're in South America, if you're in Asia, you should be able to buy and play EA Sports College Football next summer.
Well, that's great news for anybody outside of North America.
I would love to hear the story of why somebody in Finland or Mongolia or Argentina desperately wants to play this game. If that's you should shoot me an email. I'd love to interview you. But there were. I mean, I know a couple of expats who are like, hey, bro, I grew up in College Station, but now I live in Copenhagen, and do I need to go and buy a modded system to play this game? And I'm like, let me go double check. I don't want to lead you astray. Sounds like the answer is no.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. But, like you said earlier, there is a lot of NFL fans that do like football, and maybe they'll just be curious and interested what is, college football, and that might bring in more people to the sport.
Sure. I mean, that's part of the hope. I mean, the NFL has become substantially more popular all over the world. Most of my family lives in Brazil. We've gotten to know lots of people in Brazil, and there are a lot of NFL bars there. If they play an NFL game in Brazil, they're going to sell out the stadium. There's a ton of NFL fans in Mexico. There's a ton in Western Europe. Are there so many that they're going to sell an extra 8 million copies of college football in those places? No. And they're not going to, bring in a gigantic marketing effort to try and make that happen. In 20 years, who knows? Especially if this becomes like a big esports thing.
Yeah, you never know.
Never know.
And the next question, what can you tell us about customization, like stadium upgrades, rosters, team builder,
Yeah.
etc.?
What can I say here that's not going to get me into trouble? So
Yeah, we don't want to get you into trouble.
I don't want to nuke my relationship here with the company and everything. So let me try to choose my words very carefully.
Okay. Take your time.
I am aware that internally EA has shared some updates about customization with teams outside of the college football team, and I can say that on the record, the EA has confirmed to me that user-generated content and customization will be a component in the game.
Okay.
I know a little bit more than that, but if I say everything, they're not going to pick up the phone next time, and some of this is under embargo. So I'll kind of wrap this up by saying the very minute specifics of what is going to be, what can be customized or what can be built. Some of that's still TBA because, like we talked about with the game itself, that's under construction. But I understand a lot of fans are really concerned about what they're going to be able to edit or what's going to be able to be tweaked. Or like, because we're worried about IP licensing, that means we're not going to be able to upload anything. And to that, I would simply say, I based on what I know, I would relax. I think that you're going to be able to make many of the customization changes that you want. And I would encourage you to keep following that space. I think it's going to be okay.
Right. Well, that's definitely, I would say, choosing your words carefully. But besides,
I wish I could be more blunt. Like I'm not doing it because trying to drive more people to click behind the paywall, because that's basically what I wrote anyway. It's just that when you're dealing with a gajillion-dollar company with a legal department the size of Belgium, and when you're talking about video game news on YouTube, where people often take things out of context, I want to choose my words very carefully.
Oh, and I completely understand, and I'm sure most listeners that are going to be listening to this will understand completely. But that leads me to another question. Besides that topic, do you have any other information that you're not allowed to share at this time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Not a ton, and nothing that I think is so dramatically crazy that it would make the front page of YouTube. But I do know a couple of other things that I'm not allowed to share yet.
Okay. Well, that's exciting.
Yeah, I'm hopeful as we progress into next year and the build of the game becomes a little bit more solidified, and as EA begins to share some of their story themselves rather than just me kind of dripping everything, I hope I'm allowed to speak a little bit more freely.
Well, when it gets closer to the date, I'm sure the what do you call that thing? A noose? I think that'll be loosened up a little bit.
Yeah, the communications team. That's the hope.
Well, as far as customization goes, when I played the older games, because I still play college football revamped.
Sure.
One of the biggest things that I always looked for in the game is taking a smaller program, winning over time, building the funds, and upgrading the stadium, and getting bigger, newer, nicer things.
Same. I hope that's part of the experience too. That was always one of the frustrations, right? When you play some of the older games that were not revamped. You play 12, 13, 14. You started out as Kent State. You start kicking everybody's butt. You're in the Big Ten, and you're still playing in front of 27,000 people because the stadium can't get bigger than that.
Right.
I would agree with all of you. Boy, that sure would be fun. You can do it in Madden. You can do it in some of these mods. I'll just say I sure think that would be fun. We'll see what happens this spring.
Okay. Well, of course, it's that time of year. We have a playoff ranking show every Tuesday until the final one.
Yep.
Do you think, or do you know, if there will be a playoff ranking show in Dynasty mode?
I don't know about the actual show, but what I can tell you is that EA has secured the licenses, not just from individual schools and conferences and hopefully most of the players, but they've done the same for, I think as of this moment, almost every bowl game. I think there might be one or two little ones. I haven't signed the paper yet, as well as the college football playoff. and as well as ESPN. I believe Sports Illustrated is also part of that licensing group. I get asked a lot, like, hey, are they going to put, like, the ACC network or the SEC network or CBS or anything else in there? And, you know, I think it's possible that they might do this with some ESPN-owned and operated stations. I can't tell you for certain that CBS isn't a part of it, but generally ESPN has exclusive licenses for these things.
Right.
So what happens with the college football playoff show might depend on who ends up, what the next college football playoff television deal looks like. ESPN, I'm sure, will hold part of those rights, but they might be split with somebody else. But I think you should be able to expect some kind of explicit reminder about the playoff and those rankings, given that, you know, EA paid a non-trivial amount of money to get that kind of intellectual property.
Right. Okay. I know you've said in the past that FCS schools are not planned to be there at launch, and I've had a few people speculate on that. Okay, is it going to be DLC, or is it just going to be added into the next year's game? I said, I do not know. Can you enlighten me on that?
I can a little bit, and let me try to peel back the curtain and explain why they're not in the game at launch, or why they're not planned to be in the game at launch. A big part of this, I'm told, is literally about space. So, you know, college football is different from Madden and different from FIFA because anytime you add in an official team, you are not just adding 85 players, and you're not just adding the asset files for the uniforms and the fight song and the mascot and everything else. Those generally aren't huge data points. The single biggest problem is the stadium. And I have been told that the process to 3D render stadiums and convert thousands of photographs into an environment on a next generation console is actually extraordinarily complicated and expensive. That was the very first thing that EA asked schools for way back in January, I think, of 2021, right? Like a couple of days after the initial tweet. And they were saying, we need a year to start this process, and that was when they thought they were gonna launch last summer. So, you know, I've had people on the team tell me, hey, you know, part of the reason we're not doing FCS at launch is just because it would almost double the size of the game, like physically, if we added all of that stuff in there. And also, they're like, because we can't pay for the athletes for FBS schools and then not pay the FCS guys. It might not be the same contract, and so then you're looking at adding hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in licensing fees. And the fact that not all of the FCS schools can do the photography themselves, and you might have to travel to go do that. So that just very logistically, it's a big lift. The last time I talked to some people on that team about it, you know, the thought was we understand that this is really important to fans, and the interest on the school side to be in the game at the FCS level and even below that is massive. There's Division II teams that have sent notes and we're we'll do it for free, man. Come take all of our IP. We love, you know, just for recruiting. So as I understand it, what is happening here is not settled, right? Maybe it's something you drop 3 or 4 months after launch as DLC, and you figure out what kind of corners you can cut to still have a quality experience. Maybe you don't have everybody. Maybe it's something you do for next year. The full FCS wasn't really a part of the game for most of the historical games, and the ones that they were generally didn't include stadiums, or it was a kind of a truncated experience. So they're figuring that out. And I would, in my opinion, based on my conversations and what I've learned as a reporter, I don't think it's a greed thing so much as it is a recognition that you only have so much time, so much money, and so many resources that you have to say no to some things at the beginning of launch, especially because paying for all of this intellectual property gets very expensive very quickly.
Oh, right. No doubt. Oh, it certainly does. You know, Madden's only got 32 teams. And as of next year, it's going to be 134 teams in the FBS, right?
That's right. And so that means, and including the licensing of the players, means that you're paying out fees for over 11,000 people That's way more than you do for the NFLPA. It's way more than any other licensed game. And even for FIFA, that has a gajillion teams. It doesn't have the gajillion stadiums. It doesn't have the gajillion players. And it doesn't have as many assets per team as college football will. And also, FIFA sells a gajillion copies all over the world. So they can afford to maybe have a different licensing department with different resources that maybe make sense on the college football side, at least for now.
Right. So I guess that leads me to this question. Since they announced the game coming back in early 2021, is it safe to assume that rendering the stadiums has taken them the most time?
Well, I think making the game has taken the most time, but I think of the things we've discussed, whether between importing the uniforms, rendering the mascots, doing the voice recording, and I've told most of that's already done. Between the marketing plan and everything, one of the tasks that takes the most time is rendering the stadiums. And for some of these, they've had to do it more than once, because I'll give like an example off the top of my head. When Oregon State first sent in materials to EA, they were in the middle of a stadium renovation, and they had like the architect of the stadium share what the renovations would look like once they were finished. So they could be rendered, but they weren't finished. And then they came back and took photos of it now that it's finished. And so they had to go in and kind of update those renderings a little bit. There's been a few other stadiums that are like that, where they've had to go back to what they've already done and update it, because what it looks like in 2020, 22 or 23 is not going to be what it looks like next summer.
Okay. I mean, to that point, I know Colorado recently announced on their Twitter page that they're adding a big scoreboard to their stadium.
Yeah, I remember that. And so, for that one specifically, I don't know, but it's entirely possible that, they've already submitted the stuff for Folsom Field. I've seen it. They sent that, I think, even before they hired, or right as they hired Deion Sanders. But they could go back to EA and say, hey, if this is going to be ready, if we're going to have that scoreboard up and installed by July of 2024, here's what it would look like. We may not be able to get you the pictures because the crane might not be done until June, but they can still put that in the game. This came up a lot. I know from talking with folks at Sam Houston, it was a thing at BYU. I know it was a thing at Oregon State. I think Boise's just finished something or was in the process of working on something. So, that's why this has been a pretty big lift.
Well, I'm sure that's a lot of teams to cover, and with all the moving parts and changes that they're making and everything else.
That's right.
Well, I'll get into my last question here.
Sure.
This is something I thought about. It'd be nice if they, and it might come to smooth somebody's opinions over this game, maybe. Maybe. Is EA looking at previous NCAA titles for inspiration to make this game, specifically and arguably the two best college games made, NCAA Football 14 and NCAA 06?
I haven't heard anyone mention 06 specifically, but I think I can say this without getting in trouble, right? You've got people on this staff, some of whom were involved with the game, before in the 11, 12, 13, 14. You have people on the staff that did some work with Revamped. You have people on the staff that have done some work with Madden, that have done work on other titles. But again, the people who are leading this charge, that are the project managers and the senior architects and the lead developers, are college football sickos. And if you're a college football sicko, right, you're somebody that I feel pretty confident wasn't just playing 06 and 11 and 14. Some of these older guys, or guys my age, right? I'm 36. You've got people on here who've been playing since Bill Walsh on the Sega Genesis. They're in the thick of this. I also can tell you, I think without getting into too much trouble here, is that to try and make this realistic, they've also reached out to a lot of experts outside of EA. So they've historically done this. I know they've done it for this year's edition. They've asked multiple coaches, current coaches, to serve as consultants to help them build a realistic recruiting system, a realistic coaching carousel, a realistic way for roster management. Because, as I'm sure you know, and as I'm sure your listeners know, college football is completely different from how it was in 2014, especially with recruiting. We have a transfer portal now. We have NIL. We got rid of the 25-man signing limit. The distribution of recruits geographically looks very different, and how retention works is very different. So, I can tell you this: the recruiting is going to look very different from how it did the last time we played this game, and part of that is informed by them talking with experts. I also know that they've reached out to a couple of reporters and asked them to sign NDAs to get consulting work on recruiting, and also consulting work on plays, on the physics and on the playbooks and the blood and guts of the game itself. I am not one of those reporters. I am aware of I think at least 3 who are. I've been asked not to share other things because the games themselves are generally not my beat so much as this industry. But they recognize here that you need to get outside expertise if you want to make this as realistic as possible, and that's what they're doing. Can I promise you it's going to be perfect? I wish I could, man. That'd be cool, because that means we have a perfect game. I can't. But I feel, based on who I know has been involved in the consulting and who's involved in that process, if it fails, I do not believe it will fail due to lack of information. Does that help?
Oh, most definitely. And did I hear you say that a few people that worked on the mod college football revamped is working on this game?
That was my understanding. On some of those individuals were working on this on the coding side, the development side, the rendering side. That was my understanding. I don't know how many or what their exact job titles are.
Well, nevertheless, that is very cool that, EA did recognize that and said, hey, they might be able to lend a helping hand.
I keep saying, these people read the internet, man. they know what people think, and they know what the community that's still really invested in this game thinks is important and what's following them.
Okay, well, I do have one more quick question, then I'll open the floor to you to say, whatever. Yeah. I've been asked this a lot too, and I'm sure you have. Could we see something, and it might be as very little, and I wouldn't say insignificant, because anything information we get would be significant. Last November, when they announced the delay, they also showed us a rendering and picture of Brutus from Ohio State.
That's right.
Do you think around the semifinals or the national championship game that they could give us a tad bit more of something like that?
Great question. And last time I talked to somebody, on the record at EA, 2 weeks ago, I said, listen, brother, I'm getting this question all the time. Should we be expecting something around the college football playoff? And the guy laughed and said, it's possible. Well, boy, there's a whole lot I can read into that response.
Yep.
So by all means, write it. Don't take that quote and say, championship game, commercial confirmed. Not what I said. I said what I said. So yep. I definitely think that that's possible. I think that's a reasonable kind of guess. I do know that they are planning on being much more aggressive in sharing more with the world in the spring. And that will mean commercials. That will hopefully mean bringing people like me and a couple of other reporters to Florida to, to tour the campus and peek under the hood and dig into everything here. To do the same with some of the athletes that they're bringing in or have already brought in or talking through. That is something I would expect more in February, March, April, May. But, I personally would be a little bit surprised if we crown a national champion and there's nothing else that comes from this game, by that point.
I mean, that's true too. I thought about the two teams that do make it to the national championship. Maybe they show us a little maybe like a 5-second clip of something that happens actually in the game in real life.
They might. I know of a couple of schools and stadiums and fan traditions that have very basic renderings done. I don't know if any of them are teams that are likely to make the playoffs, but that could potentially be something to share. I think I can say that.
Well, hopefully they do. That'd be nice. For people that are like, we haven't heard nothing about this game. It's going to be delayed again. Like, that's typical. We usually don't hear nothing or see anything. Usually, at least 2 months out, at the most.
Yeah, that's how sports games typically work. I was looking this up because I played NBA 2K more than I play Madden and most other sports games. And you generally hear about the cover athlete over the summer, and then you don't really hear about the gameplay or see a whole lot of animations or updates until 3 or 4 weeks before release. And then there's a drip campaign those past couple of weeks. I don't mind sharing this. People at EA are kind of pissed as much as this game has gotten out already, thanks to me and a couple of other nosy reporters. But they also recognize that is, that comes with doing business with public entities. And I think because of me and because of Chris Vanini and because of 247 Sports and some other reporters, a whole lot of people have now learned about the Freedom of Information Act, which is great. That makes them more informed citizens. It will help us for other college athletics coverage. But what you are getting, even if it's just a drip, and it's not as much information as you'd like, that's atypical for most AAA sports games.
Right. So, to everybody wondering, this game, like you said, they're aiming for July. We might see gameplay early June.
Yeah, maybe earlier than that, but
okay.
I wouldn't expect someone to say like, hey, here's a video of the Team Builder app, and here's everything that you can change, and here's a tour of Colorado State's locker room, and here's exactly what the playbook's going to look like. Like, I wouldn't expect that before June 1. No.
Okay. All right. Well, is there anything else that you would like to say that I didn't ask?
I'm trying to think here. I mean, what I can tell folks is if I know something for certain, the first place I am going to publish it will be my newsletter, which you can find at extrapointsmb.com. For some of the team-specific audio or visual assets, I'm just going to tweet them. I've got a thread. It's on my Twitter is at Matt Brown EP. They're all kind of follow together here. If it's not on the website, and I think the last story I published a couple of days ago was called like Everything I Know. If it ain't there, I'm not playing coy. I'm not trying to be a dick. I don't know the answer, and I'm trying. But I also, to kind of again to peel back the curtain, this isn't my only beat. I write about conference realignment. I write about money and NIL and marketing and so many other things. And so if it's 6 weeks between updates, it's not because I don't love you. It's not because I don't care about the game. It's because that's what people put into writing, and that's what my contacts are comfortable telling me. If I call these guys every other day and it's like, hey, so what'd you do today? You got anything for me? That's a great way for them not to pick up the phone ever again. So right. I would, if you are really into this stuff and you want to support my work because it's not free for me to do, I would encourage you to check out those newsletters, and I will share information as quickly as I have it. Like that's the other thing. A lot of these open records requests cost money. I've spent close to $1,000, I think, over the last 2.5 years researching this, and I can do that in part because I have a parent company, and people pay to read this, and I learned things from those searches that became other stories, but it's not free. Like I literally just wrote a check for $114 on last week to UMass to see what their historical uniforms look like. So when I ask folks, hey, could you kick in $8 so I can dig into this here? I'm not just trying to be greedy. It's one, that's how I pay for the searches, and two, I got to buy my kids Lunchables. That's part of how I do it.
Understandable.
Yeah, they're not cheap, man.
And I mean,
But
people should be patient and understand
Yeah.
that it is your job, and you give us the information when you receive it. And I did subscribe to your newsletter because I find this information interesting in general for what you do besides just this game. If you're any kind of sports fan, I would highly recommend it.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. I'm as excited about this game as all you guys. I'm talking to you in my office right now, and I have a TV on the other side of my office that's still got an Xbox 360. It's not modded, so I can't play Revamp, but I still got NCAA 14. I turn on that Xbox. It sounds like a jet taking off. But I still play the game sometimes, and when it comes out, I'm going to be playing there right with you. May not be playing online because a bunch of you guys are going to put me in the garbage can, but I'll be playing it, and I'm excited about it too.
Well, there you go. You play it on Xbox, play it on PlayStation 3, or play it on PC. I mean, a lot of people still do.
Yes, sir.
Well, Mr. Matt Brown, thank you. That's all I had for today. I really do appreciate your time, sir.
No, listen, it's my pleasure. Let me know whenever you share this. I'll share it with my followers and with my audience. And best of luck with everything.
All right. Well, thank you, sir. I do appreciate it.
You bet. Have a great rest of your day.
All right.
Take
You
care.
too. Bye.